Common oversights that people make, these are where people come unstuck, failing to take those site surveys and soil tests up front to allow you to reasonably predict foundation costs and design your drainage solution. Temporary accommodation, an easy one to forget. If you're selling your current home, you're going to need somewhere to live. I lived 3 times with my family during my 3 projects, my in-laws. By the 3rd project, we got 3 kids and 2 dogs. We lasted about 6 weeks. We ended up having to rent, and I hadn't budgeted for that. So, be realistic. Yeah, by all means, crash on the floor with friends, family, neighbours, wherever you can save money, live on site in a caravan. But bear in mind, you still got to turn up to work. Still got to look smart, still got to keep your relationships intact. It's not going to suit everybody. So take that cost into account. Utility connection fees, I mentioned earlier, that's one that a lot of people hope for the best on, put a round number on, but actually getting the real costs early on is super important. Planning and building regulation fees is an easy one to forget. I always recommend that you put in a contingency fund. There are always unexpected costs, and getting out of the ground is often one of them, as I mentioned earlier. So perhaps put a bigger contingency in, and then you can start to free that up as the project progresses, and perhaps can start to spend a bit of that money on some nicer fixtures and finishes. Landscaping is one where, again, people hope for the best, and quantity surveyor won't necessarily take into account your full landscaping costs. It is quite a significant cost as an overall proportion of your budget, typically 15 or 20%. So again, it is something that can follow once you finish the build. My first build, I just about managed to get it finished to move in, but I didn't have the money to complete the drive until we decided to sell it a year later. If you can possibly ring fence the money in your budget, it's much nicer to live in a house that's fully landscaped. And I'd managed to turf it, I just couldn't afford to surface all of the drive. There are compromises people are willing to make. You just have to, if you know them up front, they're a decision you can make as opposed to one that's forced upon you. Interior fixtures and fittings, hopefully most people remember to include all of those costs, but lighting, light fixtures and fittings is something that's quite easy to forget. Waste disposal, something that's very often forgotten. Those grey areas, the cost of moving waste material in between the trades, the cost of moving materials between the trades, and the cost of waste disposal, skips and muck away, is something that, especially if you're preparing your own budget, it's very easy to underestimate. A builder will include them under what's known as prelims, and that's an area where the DIY project manager often comes unstuck. For prelims, I'm afraid it's those elements of cost like scaffold and muck away and site welfare for which you see no benefit. Allow 10% of your overall budget. So if you're preparing your own budget, make sure 10% is tucked away to cover those unexpected costs. Professional services, again, don't forget that as well as your architectural design fees, you're going to need an engineer, you might need a drainage designer, you might need to bring in other specialists as well.